It was a quiet Friday evening when the events that would forever haunt me began to unfold. I was 18 years old, just starting my summer break, and my parents had left town for a few days on business. It wasn't unusual for them to travel, leaving me in charge of the house. I had always enjoyed the rare moments of independence, basking in the silence and freedom to do as I pleased. But that night was different. I had been lounging on the couch, scrolling through social media, and watching reruns of my favorite television series. The clock on the wall read 11:45 p.m. when I first heard the knock. It was faint but deliberate, an odd sound at that hour. My immediate reaction was one of confusion. Who could possibly be visiting this late? Approaching the door cautiously, I peered through the peephole and saw two figures standing on the porch. They appeared to be men, dressed in dark clothing, and they didn't look familiar. My hand hovered over the doorknob as I debated whether to acknowledge them. "Hello? We're looking for Mr. and Mrs. Tanner," one of them called out. My stomach sank. They were asking for my parents. I decided to stay silent, hoping they would think no one was home. But instead of leaving, they exchanged a few words I couldn't make out and then began walking around the house. My heart raced as I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel pathway leading to the backyard. Rushing to the kitchen, I peeked out the back window. Sure enough, there they were, trying to open the back gate. Panic gripped me. I grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering my situation to the operator while keeping an eye on the intruders. "Stay hidden and keep the doors locked," the operator instructed. "Officers are on their way." The men had managed to open the gate and were now in the backyard. One of them was fiddling with the back door handle, while the other seemed to be keeping watch. I ducked behind the kitchen counter, trembling as I waited for help to arrive. A loud pop echoed through the house as the back door swung open. My worst fear had come true. They were inside. I could hear their heavy footsteps moving through the house, the floorboards creaking under their weight. They were heading upstairs, where my parents' bedroom was located. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. Minutes felt like hours as I stayed crouched behind the counter. Suddenly, the sound of sirens broke through the silence. The intruders must have heard them too, because their footsteps grew frantic. There was a loud thud upstairs, followed by muffled arguing. Then, silence. I peeked out from my hiding spot just as the police entered through the back door. They quickly made their way upstairs and apprehended the two men without resistance. One of the officers escorted me outside while the others searched the house. The cool night air hit my face, but it did little to calm my nerves. As I stood on the driveway, watching the flashing lights of the police cars, I replayed the events in my mind. How had it escalated so quickly? What would have happened if I hadn't called for help? The next day, I learned that the men had no intention of stealing anything. According to the police, they had been specifically looking for my parents. But why? What could they possibly want from them? These questions haunted me as I tried to piece together the puzzle. Weeks later, my parents revealed a chilling detail. Years ago, they had been involved in a legal dispute with a former business partner who had lost everything in the case. They never thought he would hold a grudge for so long, let alone send people to our house. The men arrested that night had been hired by him. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't some random break-in. It was a calculated act of revenge. Although the intruders were behind bars, the experience left me scarred. Every creak of the floor, every knock at the door, would send my heart racing. The safety of my home had been shattered, and I would never look at it the same way again. Even now, as I write this, I can't shake the image of those men standing on the porch, their faces obscured by the shadows of the night. It serves as a constant reminder that even in the places we feel most secure, danger can still find us. As the days turned into weeks, I tried to resume my normal life. But the shadows of that night lingered. I started noticing small things I hadn't before. Slight creak in the hallway, a flicker of movement outside the window. My mind was constantly on high alert, replaying scenarios and imagining what could have happened if the situation had escalated further. One particularly sleepless night, I decided to install a security system. Cameras, motion sensors, and alarms became my new normal. I wanted to feel safe again, even if it was just an illusion. My parents were supportive, but I could see the guilt in their eyes every time they looked at me. They hadn't anticipated their past would come back to haunt them, and now I was paying the price. Therapy helped to some extent. Talking about the incident, breaking it down piece by piece, gave me a sense of control. My therapist suggested grounding techniques to manage my anxiety, focusing on my breath, counting objects in the room, or holding something tangible to anchor myself in the present. It worked, but only temporarily. The fear had rooted itself deep within me, a constant companion. One afternoon, while reviewing the security footage out of habit, I noticed something odd. A car had slowed down in front of our house, pausing for a few moments before driving off. It might have been nothing, but it sent a chill down my spine. Were they watching us? Planning something else? I reported it to the police, but there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. Life carried on, but I was never the same. I started carrying pepper spray and a personal alarm. I avoided being home alone and always made sure someone knew where I was. My friends tried to help, inviting me out and encouraging me to move past the incident, but it wasn't that simple. Trauma has a way of weaving itself into the fabric of your being, changing the way you see the world. Months later, I decided to move out and start fresh. I found a small apartment in the city, closer to work and far from the house that now felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. My parents understood, though I could tell it hurt them. They wanted me to feel safe, but staying there was no longer an option for me. In my new place, I tried to rebuild my sense of normalcy. I joined a yoga class, took up painting, and even started dating again. For a while, it felt like I was making progress, but the memories of that night would still creep in at the most unexpected moments. A sudden knock on the door, a stranger lingering too long in the hallway. Each time, my heart would race, my palms would sweat, and I'd be transported back to that night. One evening, about a year after the incident, I received a letter. There was no return address, just my name scrawled across the front. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message that sent shivers down my spine. "We haven't forgotten." I stared at the note, my mind racing. Who sent it? Was it a prank, or was it connected to that night? I called the police, but once again, there was little they could do without more information. The sense of security I'd worked so hard to rebuild crumbled in an instant. From that day forward, I lived with a heightened sense of vigilance. I refused to be a victim again. Self-defense classes became a regular part of my routine, and I invested in even more advanced security measures. My life was far from normal, but I was determined not to let fear control me. Looking back, I realize how much that night changed me. It taught me the importance of resilience, of facing your fears head-on, even when it feels impossible. I've learned to navigate the world with caution, but also with strength. And though the shadows of that night still linger, I refuse to let them define me. This is my story, a tale of fear, survival, and the unrelenting will to move forward. To anyone reading this, let it serve as a reminder. Never take your safety for granted, and always trust your instincts. You never know what dangers might be lurking just outside your door.